The concrete jungle where dreams are made of, New York, is in a state of emergency. But not from a terror attack or a pandemic, but rather because of the work of other US states. The New York Mayor, Eric Adams, announced a state of emergency due to an influx of migrants from South and Central America who are being transported in their thousands from the Republican-led states of Texas, Arizona, and Florida. More than 17,000 have arrived in Democratic states since April, and, according to Adams, 5 or 6 buses filled with migrants are arriving daily in New York. Last month, 2 planes of migrants from Florida were sent to Martha's Vineyard, an affluent area in the northeast of the USA. Texas, Arizona, and Florida claim the migrants are being sent to so-called sanctuary jurisdictions which fail to enforce migrant laws. This is being done as a protest against Joe Biden's immigration policy on the southern border with Mexico, causing the influx into the US to reach record highs this year, and also causing havoc for the state's social services, such as schools and hospitals. But is it morally okay to use these migrants as human pawns to protest the government? Should Texas, Arizona, and Florida face a legal challenge, or is this all above board? How should the US deal with the migrant crisis?
So let's get to it by starting off with the lightning round. 30 seconds to make your case, and then we'll open up the floor. How should the United States deal with the migrant crisis? Marc Schulman, start us off.
The best way to deal with the migrant crisis is, number one, increase radically legal immigration. That's one of the major factors. The United States needs immigrants, desperately needs immigrants in terms of economics. Increase the legal immigration. We have a real problem, though, with asylum seekers because we are signed to the United Nations asylum law, so we have to find a way around that. But the best way of doing this, increase legal immigration, and then you won't have illegal immigration.
Christie, Hutherson, your thoughts, 30 seconds?
Well, first of all, we need to define it's not a migration. First of all, these aren't geese and these aren't water buffalo migrating. These are illegals coming into a sovereign country. You don't have borders. You don't have a sovereign country without those borders. To tackle this invasion, this planned invasion into a sovereign nation, we already have a lot of laws already on the books that protect all of these migrants and the illegals coming into our nation. We need to uphold those laws, and we need to do this legally. We have a president of the United States whose policies are influxing and hurting those individuals coming into this country.
Christie, I want to come back to President Biden's policies, but first I'd like to give Trimmel Gomes a chance to give his 30 seconds on this.
The United States could deal with the migrant crisis by getting Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform. That task has been left to squander as politicians use the issue as political gain, to villainize asylum seekers, and in many cases, overblowing the issue, and at worst, manufacturing the issue. You have people chartering planes. You're hearing of that earlier in the clip, chartering planes and busing these people who are seeking safety to other states, creating a crisis instead of dealing with this individual cases and making sure that they get what they're looking for, which is safety.
Right, and I want to open up the floor by asking Christie to start off on this next question. I want to specifically look at President Joe Biden. This has been an issue that's been around for decades. It's not abating, and neither is the criticism. So my question is, has Joe Biden's policies on immigration failed?
Absolutely, yes, they have failed. But from the legal perspective of American citizens, it has failed them. And it has also failed those seeking to come into this country. However, his policies haven't failed the administration's goals. So to fail something, you have to understand what the goals are of an administration. The policies, as far as he's concerned, is actually working perfectly fine. But it's bringing down America. It's destabilizing our nation and our country. We cannot afford to bring in over 5 million illegals since this president took office. And I believe the numbers are a lot higher than that because those numbers don't take into the account the getaways. It is straining a system. And I do want to touch really quick on the states, the red states they're trying to attack. And And we, under this administration, they were flying in and shipping illegals in the middle of the night to all over the United States of America. So Governor DeSantis and Abbott and Ducey aren't any new to this. This administration has been aiding and abetting trafficking for 2 years since he took office. I've been down personally at the border for over 2 years in the trenches following the movements of his policies, and they are emboldening the drug cartels. The drug cartels are making over $13 billion a year on the backs of these illegals trying to come into this country. They're exploiting them. They're being raped. They're being murdered. They're being sold into human trafficking. And it's all because of the policies of this administration.
Okay, this is already nonsense because, first of all, let's make it very clear. These people are not illegal. They're asylum seekers. Now, there's a real problem with asylum seekers because the law states that if you're an asylum seeker and you come into the United States, if you reach American soil, you can request asylum. And then, unfortunately, instead of getting 100 new judges or 200 new judges to make decisions right away, we have this backlog of cases that is ridiculously long. So there's a real problem. The solution is not to call them illegal. It's not to talk about invasion. There's no invasion. The number of 5 million of people counted twice and 3 times. It's a problem. There's no question it's a problem controlling a border when you have an issue of asylum. You need to gain control. I agree that we need to have a comprehensive immigration reform, but America needs immigrants. Let's not get away from that fact. America needs immigrants desperately. There's a shortage at this point because legal immigration was cut tremendously during the time of President Trump. Now there are not enough legal immigrants in the United States, and it's hurting economically very strongly. So the issue is how do you manage to balance all these needs? It's not a policy. I mean, there's the impression that the Biden administration wants all these people to come. The Biden administration is doing the same problems, is dealing with the same problems that every previous administration has dealt with. Poor people want to come to America.
Right.
Once upon a time, American doors were open. Today, they're not.
I want to jump into the conversation and just bounce something off here because you've both mentioned some interesting points, and I'm hoping that Trimmel will join in the conversation here, where you mentioned that we are having an issue physically with these people coming in, but what about the American public? Is the American public seeing this as sympathy for these migrants, or is there sort of this backlash from them of whatever economic problems they're running away from, they are bringing to possibly America? Trimmel, can you start us off?
Sure. I'd like to say, migrants who are risking their lives to land in the USA proves that America remains a beacon of hope and prosperity for many seeking a better way of living. That's what's happening here. As far as how the American perception of this issue, you heard from your guests who, again, as I mentioned earlier, this overemphasis of fear-mongering about what the brand of America is all about. It's a nation of immigrants. People coming to this country. It's very contradictory now to do the opposite and say you're not allowed to come in here. That's what is etched on the Statue of Liberty. So it's just this fear-mongering that we're seeing from many. There was not an issue until we saw the flying of migrants to different states. That issue was manufactured. These Republican governors gathered together and decided this was a plan to ahead of the midterms to have this issue take over the headlines. So many of these issues is just created.
Christie, I see you shaking your head there. Marc, I just want to jump to Christie. I see you shaking her head.
Well, first of all, I've spent the last 2.5 years with me and my team down at the southern border, on the border. I've traveled all 3,000 miles of border on both sides in Mexico and in the United States and in Central America. And I'd love to find out if the guests have actually been down there. This issue, since the 2 weeks into the Biden, besides a photo op, this issue, besides 2 weeks into the Biden administration, has been a huge problem. And I'm going to address the asylum seeker. Even the own Border Patrol and protection agencies, less than 14% coming over qualify under the claims of fear, credible claims of fear into another country. So what about the whole other percentage of the other ones coming here and flooding into the United States? It's because they're being brought over here. They're given freebies. They're given all sorts of carte blanche by this administration, by the United Nations, by NGOs, et cetera, to come into our country. By the way, I'm an immigrant. My family, I'm a Russian Jew. My family fled Stalin. We came here, we're written in Ellis Island. I believe in legal, proper immigration. I've been down at the border.
Ellis Island was closed by the time you came, but okay.
My team has rescued little girls and little boys, literally from the cartels, who are being traded and sold into the sex slave industry. This administration, this isn't political for me. This is a humanitarian crisis at the border. Women, children, and men are being raped, killed, sold into labor slavery, sex slavery, murdered for their organs. I could go on and on. We have the videos to prove it. I've got the proof. So this administration's policies not only are harming American citizens,
can I ask what your policy would be? Can I ask what your policy would be? You're now in charge.
Absolutely.
What is your policy? What's your solution?
So we have legal immigration laws on the books. Yes, do they need to be tweaked? Yes, do they need to be revamped? Absolutely, they do. We need to speed up the process, the red tape, the paperwork, all of those things need to be addressed. But the rightful thing to do to protect both those coming into America through the southern and northern borders illegally, there's reasons why we do this legally to protect them. And again, this isn't political for me. President Trump's policies weren't perfect, but they were saving lives.
Okay, I didn't hear a solution to your what you had to say. The reality is there's been a problem of immigration.
We need to speed up our processes.
Okay, I think everyone agrees with that. Now, all we need is Congress to allocate the money in order to do that. But the Congress won't allocate the money to do that because the Senate won't pass a comprehensive immigration reform because Republicans have blocked it time and time again. That's the reality. There's been no comprehensive immigration reform now for 2 decades. It's necessary. Everyone agrees with it. Those are things that will help solve the problem. There's also, of course, world economic issues that make things very difficult. But that's the reality. The United States has always had immigrants. It's a nation of immigrants, and it's always had people against immigration. Going back to the Do Nothing Party in the 1880s, were against Catholic immigrants, were against the Irish because they were afraid that Catholics were going to take over. And then eventually the Do Nothings won. In 1921, the gates of the United States were closed because of a fear of immigration. And that's part of the reason so many Jews died in the Holocaust, because the gates of America were closed. And it wasn't until 1965 that the gates were opened again.
Not only is this a pressing problem, but it also seems to coincide with the timing of elections, which for many seems like a trend, for others it seems sort of like a coincidence. But there is no denying, as all of you have mentioned, and there is some common ground there I believe that we can agree on, that this has been a problem over decades throughout all the administrations that is yet to find a viable, credible, and agreeable, in a sense, solution that we can put forward and move. We are running out of time, but I do want our panelists to stay with us just so we can continue the conversation. And apparently it's not only affecting American borders, but it also crosses borders and affects this part of the world, particularly in Europe. So stay with us, our amazing panelists. We'll be back after a short break. Don't go anywhere. We've got much more to debate. Thank you all so much for being with us and taking part in what really is turning out to be a very lively debate. As I mentioned before the break, immigration is not just something that sees a problem on America's borders, but in this part of the world too, Europe also seems to have the problem, in particular some countries where you have to get there by water. Take a look.
We've got to stop the boats crossing the channel. This has gone on for far too long. But I have to be straight with you. There are no quick fixes, and the problem is chronic. Organised criminal gangs are selling a lie to thousands of people. Many are drowning in the channel. Many are leaving a safe country like France and abusing our asylum system. I will commit to you today that I will look to bring forward legislation to make it clear that the only route to the United Kingdom is through a safe and legal route. And that's so that we can help support those who need our help the most, including women and girls. So if you deliberately enter the United Kingdom illegally from a safe country, you should be swiftly returned to your home country or relocated to Rwanda.
So another lightning round to knock off the second half of the debate. Does any country actually have this right? It's not just America. Does anyone have policies in place that are getting this correct? Christie, I saw you shaking your head and possibly smiling at the sound bites that just played. What's your take?
Well, first of all, that's subjective. Each country, immigration laws are put in place to protect, first and foremost, the legal citizens who are inhabitants of that country. So I don't know if that's really an answer that you can give as far as does anybody have a legal right to do so, because, again, it's subjective. But I will tell you this, a lot of her comments are absolutely 100% correct. Legal immigration is going to be the pivotal point to save lives in this huge migration crisis all over the globe.
Trimmel, does any country actually have this down?
That will take a significant amount of research to see who is doing it right, and no system is perfect. Otherwise, we would be adopting it. What was said in that clip there is the same thing that the other guests previously said. They're conflating asylum seekers to illegal immigration, and it's not the same. It's this fear-mongering of people who are coming to a nation for safety. And with those policies there, you have some who are just using fear to say this is causing a crisis when each case needs to be dealt with individually.
Right, and Christie, I see you shaking your head in disagreement, but I'd like to ask Marc, agreement or disagreement? Does any country got it right?
No one has it right, because overall immigration has always been driven by economic needs. People have come, except maybe the pilgrims who came for religious reasons, people have come to the United States because of economics, seeking better times. In Europe, the same thing is happening, where Europe is, of course, much richer than Africa, parts of Asia. Immigrants want to come. The problem is that Europe needs immigrants, which is one of the strange situations. The United States and Europe are in the same boat. They need immigrants. They don't know how to deal with it. Now, we have an advantage. We're a country of immigrants, the United States is, and so it shouldn't be such a problem. But Europe, it's not a country of countries of immigrants, and they're really having a difficulty dealing with different people.
So to open up the floor here, I'd like to read you all a quote. Britain's Home Secretary also said that immigrants are gaming the modern slavery system, accusing many of lying about being trafficked to possibly get asylum. My question here is, a lot of people believe that immigration systems are not just broken, but they're wrong. So what kind of wrong are we talking about? Are they morally wrong or are they legally wrong? Marc?
Okay, you have two parts to this. First of all, legally, the whole issue of asylum is part of the United Nations agreement on terms of refugees and asylum. The United States is a signatory of that, and we have to abide by that as long as we're a member of that. So we're a signature to that agreement, and it spells out what is an asylum seeker and what rights an asylum seeker has. So a lot of these people may be gaming the system by requesting asylum, but they're gaming the system because that's the way the system is set up. Immigration generally is a good thing. It allows people to go from places where there is not work to places where there are work. It lets people go to places with need workers to places where they don't need workers. However, it creates problems of its own. It displaces people culturally. It makes people feel like they're being overwhelmed, and that's more of the problem than anything else. It's not an economic problem, more of a social, cultural problem, a feeling that these people are replacing me, not in terms of the workplace, but in terms of their language, their culture. But that's been going on in the United States since the second wave of immigration. Now, no one was quite like the first wave of immigration, so to speak. No one was good enough. And that's always been the case in the United States. But the United States was built thanks to immigrants.
Christie, how do you feel about that?
Well, first of all, they're trying to put all of this into a one-size-fits-all immigration. Over 85% of those seeking to enter the United States illegal, first of all, are not asylum seekers. Those aren't my numbers. Those are Border Patrol's numbers and Department of Homeland Security, et cetera's numbers. So that's a false narrative, first and foremost. There's no fear-mongering here. I've been to the border. I've rescued children from the cartel. I've been to the rape trees. I've been on the Mexican highway. The drug cartels, every single person who comes over the border right now has to pay the drug cartel in the tune of over $1,500 plus. Some of them it's a lot higher than that. So that is human trafficking, not only on a domestic level, but on an international scale. Some of those individuals don't even make it here because they're raped and murdered along the trail. Women have to have the morning after pill, meaning their parents and their families send them along with these. This isn't fear mongering; these are facts. And
okay, so let me ask you a question. How would you feel? How would you feel right now if the United States decide? How would you feel right now if the United States decided, okay, we're going to issue 400,000 immigrant visas in Ecuador, wherever the large number of these people are coming, we're going to issue 400,000 immigrant visas. They're all going to come legally. We're going to fly them on regular aircraft. We're going to process them. We're going to make sure that none of them are criminals, none of them have criminal records. We'll do all the things necessary for legal immigration, but we're going to take 400,000 new immigrants from these countries next week, starting next week. Would you be in favor of that or opposed to that?
No, we have legal processes how to process individuals into our country. And first of all, your numbers are incorrect.
In order to solve the problem,
we have 175 plus different nations influxing. This isn't just Central and South America. That's a false narrative that you're putting out there. We have terrorists.
Those are the ones that are coming. Those are the ones coming from the border.
These aren't individuals who are all great people seeking a better way of life.
I didn't say they're great people. I didn't say what they are.
We have terrorists coming into this nation.
So that's right. So I'm asking you once again, how about we offer 400,000 immigrant visas from those countries where most of them are coming. We vet them according to whatever, in terms of criminal and everything else. And we take 400,000 of these people, we bring them legally into the country starting next week. Then when they won't come illegally, they won't be raped.
If they stand in line just like everybody else.
What does that mean, stand in line?
Waiting in line for 6, 7, 8 years. We need to reform immigration. I'm not saying that we don't. We have red tape in the way.
But we have a crisis. You're saying there's a crisis.
I'd like to just jump in and ask a question based on that, the stand in line. We've seen Ukrainians and Russians been given visas all over the world to escape what is going on right now. We're talking about highly skilled and educated people. Excuse me for being blunt here, but is this all just about color as well? Trimmel, are people coming over that are, is this a color war as well?
I would like to add to earlier that there is an immigration process in the United States that works out. I would like to remind people that people are deported from the United States. There's a process to entering this country, and when you commit a crime, there's a process where you get rejected from this country. Going into the colorism issue and the other issue of only bringing in highly skilled workers, that's a moral question that people need to reckon with. Which is like, what about others? Not everyone are scientists, but how do they contribute to society? We should not just focus on those. There are other people who add to this world. This is why we are on this world. It takes one hand to shake the other. We all come together and make this world revolve. So the colorism issue, there's so many issues that goes into immigration. And when it comes to the United States, it's not being solved. And it takes these lawmakers going into the room and really coming up with a comprehensive plan.
Well, unfortunately, and I apologize to cut you off, Trimmel, we are out of time, but not out of passion, in particular on such a bipartisan issue. But thank you very much to our panelists for joining us.